when we talk about racism, we also have to talk about how do we move forward. How can a person become an anti-racist? And it has to start with acknowledgement, right? Oftentimes you hear people say, and it sounds good, I don't see color, right? So that's a problem in itself. And you can't become an anti-racist if you can't be realistic, right? And so we have to become comfortable having these uncomfortable conversations, and then we need to take and examine our own self, right? We must take a really, really close look, and even black people, right? There's the movie called When They See Us. I said I can't wait for the movie that comes out that says When We See Us, because oftentimes we see ourselves as being threats. We see ourselves as being not equal and less than, inferior to white people. And so lots of conversations have to take place, and then we need to go ahead and be very intentional with planning the next step. After we get past the acknowledgement, now what are you going to do? So before we can branch out and have the conversations with other people, we need to check ourselves, right? And so we need to have a call to Jesus moment with ourselves, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're brown, and you need to gain a better understanding of what racism is and what role you may have. Oftentimes we have implicit biases, and people do things and they don't think that what they're doing is wrong. They don't think that it's offensive to anyone else. So I think that, first having that conversation with self and with your family, and then being open to listening. Be open to listening, right? Because sometimes, too often, when a person says, I want to talk to somebody about this, they get on the defense, right? They become very defensive and they feel a need to justify their behaviors. So when we talk about steps towards becoming anti-racist, prepare yourself to be a good listener, right? Prepare yourself to take what is being very generously given to you, right? Because someone's telling you about their lived experiences and how some of the behaviors that you either actively do or that you support are racist. And so those are some of the steps that we need to take. We need to ensure that we're electing people in these key legislative positions that are going to not just say that Black Lives Matter, but enact legislation that shows it. And it's very easy to do. One of the first things that we can do is defund the police, okay? We can defund the police and understand a lot of people get scared by hearing that, and when they hear it, they think that's a black people's thing. That's something that black people want to do. However, what we're saying in translation is reallocate funds to systems of care. It all goes back to we are begging for equity, we are begging for humanity. We can be intentional about our own behaviors, where you decide to go shop, right? What organizations you decide to support, where you decide to plant your next family, right? Where you're going to buy your home at. Ask yourself, are you unintentionally only looking at neighborhoods that you deem safe because black people don't live there, right? So again, there are a lot of steps that we can take to ensure that we are moving towards anti-racism, and the fact that anyone would even entertain it, that's big, entertain the conversation, right? And then we need to just go some steps, past that. If you are sincerely looking to become an anti-racist, if you are really, truly, and sincerely wanting a diverse, society where we are all treated with equity, right? Not just equality, but equity, right? We need the same access, the same abilities to reach some of the same goals, right? To be able to exist. And so having the conversations, ensuring that our legislation is enacting, gestures, or not just gestures, but our legislators are enacting legislation that is very inclusive, right? And that's not divisive. Redlining is very real. It is very real, and it keeps us very much so segregated. When we look at, Monument Avenue, again, the price to live here is so high that it makes that very clear divide between the haves and the have-nots, right? So what is it that we can do? It costs money, but if we put our money together, we can start buying some of these houses and making it more affordable for other people to move into, right? So there's a way that we can reverse gentrification as well, and that's something that I don't hear anyone talking about. I would love to get my hands on one of these big properties and go ahead and be intentional with planting black people in the same places that we were kicked out of. So when you want to talk about being anti-racist, let's talk about what we can actually do to reverse the many harms of racism. newspaper. So I don't feel that the work of anti-racism will ever be done. But it's not something that we can't give up on. It's not something that, we can take a passive, or a reactionary approach to. I think that we have to be intentional with our actions. I think we need to be very proactive. One step in doing that is all kids legally have to go to school, right? And so our schools can be, and they should be, our first line of defense in addressing this. We have to start by history lessons, right? Our school systems are and were created when Black people were not even considered human, right? We were not considered the equals, very openly of white people. So when we look at history and the lessons that are taught, there's a lot of miseducation taking place in our schools, but we very intentionally skirt talking about racism, right? So the school division that I work for, we have something called community circles, right? Which is required at the beginning of the day for all students. And during that time, we have these conversations. We talk about racism. We talk about how it makes a person feel when they're treated differently because of the pigmentation of their skin. So the work can and never will be done, but what we do have an opportunity to do is to take a very proactive approach, right? And when we talk about racism, it's not just on the ground, the people who are directly impacted. We have to talk about legislation. We have to talk about our local, state, and federal legislation, because people and entities are empowered to continue their racist practices, because of the green light and the blessings of a racist system. Okay, systemic racism is very, very real. Whether we're talking about the inability of a family to gain residence in an area such as this monument area that I'm standing at right now here in Richmond, Virginia, or if we're talking about, schools and how some of our schools are, there's a clear divide because we have our private schools that get, clear funding from the state, while we have our public schools that are in our most marginalized communities that don't even have air conditioning in the summertime, or the textbooks are so outdated, right? We have schools that, the water is not clean. We can take it outside of Richmond, Virginia, and we can go to, Flint, Michigan. Okay, let's talk about the water crisis and lead in the water there. And let's look at the people who were impacted. It wasn't in predominantly white neighborhood. It was in the Black neighborhoods that were impacted by it. So our legislation has a huge role, in perpetuating the cycle, in the system of racism. Our system's not broke. It's working as it has been designed to function. Our system is unjust, and that is what has to be addressed. And I believe that in order for us to move forward and really making change, as far as becoming anti-racist, we have to kill the snake at the head, and that head is going to be our legislation. We can't put people in these key positions that say that, Black Lives Matter, but they refuse to pass legislation that shows that Black liberation matters. We can't put people in these positions that look like us, but they're truly not for us, right? And so again, the people who are oppressed need to be empowered, and I'm a strong believer in that we must enlighten people, empower people, and then we are able to mobilize them. But if we don't start with that enlightenment, okay, then people definitely won't feel empowered to be a part of the change. But once we're able to enlighten them, once we're then able to empower them, to let them know that, guess what, your voice, your abilities are needed, and you absolutely can take on some of these key positions, then we can mobilize them, whether it's running for local city council, running for governor, running for the president of the United States, because oftentimes some of the biggest racists are sitting in these key positions, and they're making decisions about us that impact us, and they don't relate to us. We need to be intentional with creating environments of inclusion. The Marcus David Peters Circle is one of those environments. What we saw was nothing but love and diversity. I mean, diversity across all intersections. People came far and wide to be here and to take up that positive energy, right? So if we want to truly become an anti-racist country, an anti-racist state, then our actions need to speak 10 times louder than any of our words. We need to go ahead and make sure that we are funding Black futures. We need to make sure that we are funding our Black communities, our Black schools, and giving them an equitable opportunity as we do with our white peers. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is I don't want to say my, but our, because this is not a one-person show. It will never be, you know. But being able to be one of the voices of the unheard, because so often it is the poor people, Black people, our most marginalized communities, that our voices, our concerns, and our needs are never addressed. Being able to have the opportunity to host events that are intentional, that bring people together. You know, I hear people say all the time, I just had some amazing conversations, you know, with people that we probably would never ordinarily have conversations, you know, with. So when we talk about being anti-racist, right, that's you know, kind of pushing the envelope some to, you know, force people to step outside of their comfort zone, you know, to be around people that maybe you were uncomfortable with being around because of the pigmentation of the skin, so that we can now go past that so that you can find the humanity in that individual. So, you know, being able to bring people together, you know, as unity and humanity is what we're fighting for. And that's also very sad to me, is that we have to put in so much energy, you know, that we have to continuously, it's kind of like Black people are put in positions where we have to be educators, you know, we have to educate people, and people feel that that's a part of our responsibility to tell them about racism and how their behaviors are racist, you know. And so we're fighting for humanity and equity to just be able to survive. And I think that that's what hurts with all of this work. You know, white people don't have to fight for that, right? You know, but as a minority, these are our everyday struggles. And by us not fighting for it, it affects us in housing, in employment, and equal pay, you know, and access to healthy foods, you know, just from an education from A to Z. And so I'm thankful that, you know, I, some way or another, find the energy to do what I do, but I feel that anything worth having is worth fighting very hard for, you know, and the only battle lost is the one that we never fight, and I'm here for it.